So we have our last session here for this evening. Beyond our closing, we'll have a quick closing at the very after this, but this is going to be a two-parter. We have two sessions today. We're going to be talking about the urban tree forest master plan, and we're also going to be talking about forest restoration a bit here. Basically what happened after the Asian longhorn beetle crisis. So first up, I want to introduce the commissioner, the head, I should say, the chair of our Urban Forest Tree Commission, Joy Winburn. She is not only the chair of that, but she's done a lot of work on this. She studies this stuff. This is her specialty. So we're very fortunate to have her here. Dr. Joy Winburn.
Awesome. Thank you for that great introduction. Yes, and thank you everyone for being here today. I'm excited to share with you, as the title suggests. Is it okay if I walk away? Because I'm a talker with my hands. So, all right, I can take it with me. Woohoo! I'm excited to share with you what's in the Worcester's new urban forestry master plan. And so before we get started, I just wanted to share a little bit about myself. John did a great introduction there. I love all things trees and soils. And these are pictures of me doing research on this said things. I'm a professor up at University of Massachusetts in Lowell. And if you want to read more about my research or find my contact information and reach out, my website is right there. So just wanted to introduce myself. All right, so the Worcester Urban Forestry Tree Commission, a little history. I got started in 2022, and I wanted to just acknowledge all of the other commissioners who all bring different but very important expertise to the commission. We have a lot of really great tree experts here in the city that are volunteering to be on this commission. And I highlight that one of our commissioners had to step down in District 4. So there's a map here. If you live there in District 4, come join us. We have really fun meetings and love the trees, and you can help kind of guide the vision that we're going to talk about today. So come apply. All right, that's my little pitch there. So more of the history, our pathway to creating this plan. So the Green Worcester plan, in that plan in 2021, was a step of let's develop our first urban forestry master plan. And so in 2022, we had the creation of this commission to help provide guidance on the creation of the plan. Kind of happening in tandem is the city hires DV Research Group to a tree group to start doing their street tree inventory, which we haven't had done since 2005. So it's very much outdated. But we have that one from 2005, and I'll show you some of the results from that. So we update our street tree inventory. They've also been leading the draft. So they presented the first draft to the commission and the public June 2023, and we all commented on it. We got an updated draft in October of 2023. As a commission, we have further created more comments in our January, February, March meetings. And we're waiting to see another updated draft that we hope will be the final draft. So I will share with you what is in the October 2023 plan, and as we go along, discuss some of the new additions we're anticipating to see in the final plan as our commission has discussed and voted on adding. But a little history. Also, where do you find this draft? Maybe you're like me. You find the Worcester website can be a little bit of a maze sometimes. So that's the link if you want to find it. And when you go to that website, I think it's my next slide. We'll just skip ahead a little bit. You'll see this on the very front of that website. Trees in the city, right tree, right place. And if you scroll down, scroll, you'll find Urban Forest Master Plan and click on the Master Plan draft. You can also find presentations from past meetings. So lots of great info there. And also the email address, if you would like to comment on the plan, there's the email address right there. So please send us your feedback as well. All right. So what is in the plan? What is our vision? That was the first part of the plan, the vision statement of what we hope to see Worcester to be. And there's kind of 4 components to it. First, a model of proactive management. You'll see that proactive there a lot. Yep. Currently, if you want a tree in your backyard or in front of your street, which if you do right now, you can call 311 and put in that request. But unfortunately, it is kind of that sort of proactive response to people who are actively calling or non-proactive versus a more proactive approach of getting into areas where people are maybe don't have the time to get on the phone and call and request trees. So we're kind of moving in that direction and talking about action steps to get there. Through intentional planning and community engagement, we want to ensure that our forest is diverse. We've learned the hard way, and the next talk will talk a lot about the lessons, I imagine, from the Asian longhorn beetle and why tree diversity is so important to our resilience. And make sure it's well distributed, that we have canopy cover that is equitable, that everybody can benefit from in the city. We envision a city where the urban forest is well cared for. So a lot of the plan, and I won't go into all of those details today, I'm just going to give you like big highlights because it is a long plan, but a lot of it goes into management because as much as we love trees and all the amazing things they do in the city, I find it hard to believe, but people don't love trees. I've met a lot of people who don't love trees. And it's usually because that branch fell on their car, that root got in their sewer pipe, and so there's maintenance. And that's really important in the city to maintain our urban forest and do that in a proactive manner. And through nurturing a resilient and sustainable urban forest, we aim to create this greener, healthier city. So that's a big vision. It's good to start with big visions, right? And also just want to acknowledge everybody who's been part of this. I mentioned some key players, but there's been the city manager, city council, Department of Public Works and Parks, and many, many, many wonderful groups that we have here in the city who have been contributing to the development of this plan. So the plan is divided into kind of 5 sections. And as I mentioned, I'm just going to give you kind of high level overview of some of the interesting tidbits in the plan. But just if you want to dig into it, there is a whole section that goes into just the overview of why are urban trees important? Why should we be caring about creating a plan to protect and increase our urban canopy? It has a second section of going into what is the state of the current forest. So let's take all the available data that we have in Worcester, along with the street tree inventory that we did, and evaluate what the current situation is. A whole section that's really focused on management plans and developing best management practices. And I'll talk a little bit about, as a commission, we've started to think about tree ordinances, which is kind of the policies we have to work on helping protect trees in the city. So we've been focusing on that. And there is a whole appendix that is part of the plan that goes into like what the existing policies are for protecting the urban forest. A section on engagement and outreach. So part of the plan is there were several community meetings as well as a community survey. So I'll show you some of the results from that. And then lastly, but most importantly, our recommendations. So Davey, who's been leading this, put together 10 recommendations and specific action steps towards getting to those goals. And I'll just talk about some of the high level ones that I'm most excited about. And perhaps you all are too. All right, so let's get into it. But before, the professor and me wants to ask all of you, what is an urban forest? How do we even define, what are we talking about when we say we're making a master plan for urban forests? Is that green infrastructure, our bioswales and rain gardens, and all the things we've been talking about? Is that an urban forest? Are the green roofs? Yeah. Holler out. What do you think of when you think urban forests? All the trees in the city. Yeah. What about the grasses? I think about the grasses too. I think any kind of plant soil system something that's not pavement, not a build, oh wait, but then there's green roofs, so maybe that's part of it too. So yeah, everybody kind of defines it differently. But thank you for all sharing. But yeah, urban forest, what are we talking about? It's oftenly defined, as Evelyn pointed out, as the tree canopy extent, which we're able to kind of look at using satellites at really coarse resolutions, but we can kind of see what is the big green patches of trees. And we often focus on the trees because they can provide some of the biggest benefits to our society. So I really like this figure from Nature Conservancy, who's increasingly been working in cities, that just kind of highlights some information about all the things trees do for us. My research focuses a lot on that cooling effect and trying to better understand, especially with extreme heat waves and climate change, how are trees going to respond to them and what does that mean for how they can cool temperatures. Another one we've talked a lot about is managing stormwater. And then there's many other benefits, health benefits, benefits to other organisms besides us. And those are all there. But also in cities, as I already mentioned, trees in the right tree in the right place. There's a lot of management that has to be considered if we want to harness those benefits and not be too upset about trees and the damage. So, you know, this figure does a good job of kind of explaining how we want to put smaller trees that are under electrical lines because they're going to get pruned in half, and that's not going to be a very healthy tree when that happens. And being careful about where they're placed. So we think a lot about that in this plan as well. All right, so let's jump into what's in the plan, making sure I'm staying on time. We have about 37% canopy cover, tree canopy cover. Another 24% of the total land area in the city is grass. And so we're doing pretty good. This is a figure on the left from the plan that shows kind of how we compare to other cities in the area in regards to that. And this data that pie chart I just showed you is from the Worcester Extreme Heat Study. And this is just some data from looking at surface temperatures. And what you see is our core is really hot compared to those areas outside of the core. And this study recommended that if we want to make the city more resilient to heat, we should plant 30 to 35,000 trees by 2050, especially in those areas that have the least amount of tree cover, which tend to correspond to those red areas. And this is another tool and data set at our hands to think about kind of making an equitably distributed forest. Is what's called the tree equity score. So I put the website there. You too can kind of play around with that little map and look into, and they use that tree equity score to look at, is the distribution, is there a lot of trees there or not? And you'll notice the orange where we have low equity scores tend to correspond to those hot areas. And I would argue that one thing we need to think about as a city and as a commission into the future plans as we execute them is getting creative. And we're seeing that here today in the parking lot, like ripping up the parking lot and putting a forest in. We got to get creative if we want to reach these goals. All right, so the plan focuses a lot on the street tree inventory, which is the best resolution data that we have on our urban forest. So I do just kind of want to emphasize the whole forest, all of the trees on public and private is the urban forest. But the plan currently focuses on that, which is public and primarily the street tree inventory, for which we have about 23,137 stems, which is about a 50% increase from where we were when they did the last inventory, which we'll hear a lot about very shortly why that increase occurred. And there's loads and loads of data about the street tree inventory, looking at age distributions and species and all sorts of things. But one thing I wanted to highlight is opportunities for growth. So this is looking at maintenance needs. And the way you can think about this is if a tree needs pruning, it's probably in pretty good shape. Those are trees that exist and are pretty happy, just need a little pruning. There's the tree removal. Those are trees that are not healthy, most likely dead and need to be removed. We don't have a crazy amount of those, so that's a good thing. But that plant tree area, so when they walked every single street in the city, they noted where we could put a tree in, where there's an empty pit or a stump that we just need to grind out. So there are a lot of opportunities, but you'll notice that's not 30,000 that was recommended by the heat study. And our population of street trees is becoming much more diverse. And again, we'll hear from our next speakers about kind of the reasons why this happened. But when trees were removed, we replaced them with different things other than maple, which was predominantly our forest in 2005, was 60% Norway maple. We're down to 28 on that species, which is very invasive. And now we have many different genuses as well as species. So we're getting more diverse, learning from our lessons. And another thing, as I mentioned, there's a whole section on management. And this is just one slide from that section. But I just want to kind of emphasize in thinking to the future, to achieve the goals that we're trying to set for canopy cover, we need to do more investment into resources to do that. And so at the top here, that top bar chart is just showing what the budget is, the forestry budget, pretty much a flat line, and how that compares to other cities, other northeastern cities, but also other cities with similar population sizes. And when you compare it to other cities with similar population sizes, we're spending about a third as much. So there's room to increase our budgets and think about creative ways to do that as well, working with community partners. Actually, I'll switch it around for a minute. Our community partners, we have so many great community partners here to think of creative ways to increase that budget. And this is just a list in the plan that talks about all those partnerships that exist. And you can go into the plan to read more about the details of those. And in that section on community engagement, they did a survey. They had about 1,131 respondents in the survey. Greater than 50% of those respondents lived in Worcester for more than 11 years. And note, Worcester has about 200,000 people. So I'm not a sociologist, but I think we could increase our respondent. There might be some biases of self-selection for people who responded to the survey because they love trees. So keep that in mind. But how do you feel about this tree in front of your home? That was one of the questions. I love it. I was an N of one in there. I love it. And other reasons people, it's okay. I don't like it is, you know, a good percentage. I don't have one, but I wish I did. If you're in that category, you can call 311 and get a tree. And why do you feel the way you do about your street tree? Like, why do we love the trees around our homes and in our communities? And lots of good reasons, but enjoying the shading benefits of trees is high up there. So heat resiliency. And I because my research focuses a lot on how trees move water, like to emphasize it's not just the shade, all that water they move from the ground to the atmosphere. It cools those local temperatures, but you can't quite see it. So it gets not appreciated as much. So the plan has a lot of recommendations. And as I mentioned, this is the October 2023 plan. And where we made a lot of exciting improvements and specific action plans. But in particular, things we're excited about is that proactive management with things like, as a commission, we set a goal to see a 3-to-1 planting ratio. For every tree that's removed, replace it with 3, because if you replace it with 1, because of the way trees work and size distributions and such, you're going to have a total decline in canopy cover. The math just doesn't work out to have a 1-to-1 ratio. So 3-to-1, that's speaking citywide, not just street trees, but working and partnering with citizens to get that ratio achieved with private planting as well. Another one that I'm excited about that I'll mention in kind of next steps is conducting a comprehensive urban tree canopy assessment. So we have focused on street trees because that's the best resolution data we have at the tree level. We don't have great data set to look at the entire city, but that doesn't mean we shouldn't start making goals with the data that we have available. So I'm really excited about next steps until we can get some really high resolution data for the whole city can map out every single tree. Until we get there, we have lots of incredible expertise in this city. So we're going to put together in the next year a Worcester Urban Forestry Summit, in part inspired by this summit, and bring people together and kind of have that be a 2-day thing where it's a public component, but then also a workshop kind of component of like putting our heads together and thinking about realistic goals based on the available data. Because we need to act now. Trees take a bit of time before we get all those benefits. We're also working on updating ordinances. That's a big focus of the next year's meetings for the commission. Is to think strategically there. And Davey's been great, and we're asking them for recommendations on that as well. And then our next meeting, I just showed that last one said it's tough, but it's June 5th. So come on down. We're hopeful that we'll have an updated draft of the plan. And that's our focus of our next meeting is to discuss it. So with that, I think I probably ran out of time already.
You had a minute left.
So I don't take any questions now, but that's the middle daughter in the Milwaukee Forest. What keeps me motivated and going. So, all right, thank you, everyone.
Moving up to our speakers, I should say. Some of you guys who have been living in Worcester for a while remember when we first started hearing about the Asian longhorn beetle crisis. Everyone sort of was like, "What is this?" Didn't really understand, and then all of a sudden it became out, and the ramifications of that were considerable. Anyone who's lives up near the Birmingham area can attest to that. But one of the in the long run for what happened there, and one of them is that we were able to do a lot of folks did some really good analysis of what happens when a piece of a city, a chunk of the city loses a significant amount of tree cover. How does that impact temperatures? How does that impact people's just general understanding and love of their neighborhood? It gave folks in that area, I say this, stealing anything from the talk, a sense of appreciation for what a neighborhood includes. And it's not just the people, not just the homes and the street, it's the trees and the nature that comes with that. So part of that analysis, we were very fortunate that folks at Clark in particular, our two speakers here, John Rogan and Nicholas, I'm going to get it wrong, Nicholas Giron were studied what happened after the Asian longhorn beetle crisis, both shortly right after the event as well as subsequently later. Yep, I can also say that John Rogan and Nicholas, were you there at the very beginning? No. No, okay. The work with John at Clark is now for himself over at Salem State University. Has done a lot of work on similar topics now, and this work here. I should also mention too, because I was negligent to not, John Rogan, if you haven't known, ever been to the Hadron Arboretum up off the corner where Lovell and May Street meet. If you've noticed that space, that wooded space, and noticed now how unbelievably cleaner and better organized that space is, that is all a tribute to what John and some of his students, and of course what Nicholas has done too, to bring that back to life. It's truly amazing. And every time I go by, I go, I know the guy who did that. That's so cool.
Well, thank you so much. And thanks for a great presentation, Joy, as well. And thanks for inviting us. So Nick and I are presenting on behalf of our research team at Clark, and especially Deborah Martin, who many of you probably know. And we wrote an op-ed to the Telegram and Gazette in 2013. And it's the main quote I'll point out here is, as we continue to monitor our urban forests for longhorn beetle, at the time it was still a present danger, not so much anymore, We should remember that tree losses occur every day as we grow and change our regional land cover. And so we espouse the notion that through data science and the research that we do at Clark University, we're monitoring, we're an observatory, and we're always happy to provide updates. And you'll see very quick updates from us. And for academics like us, it's really hard to not speak for a long period of time. So watch us struggle before your very eyes, okay? If for no other reason, just watch us struggle. Okay, so we do research as we produce information like this, and this information was produced as a result of the catalyst of the longhorn beetle. The first thing we looked at was temperature impact. So a 10% increase in impervious cover. So as you take away tree cover for your pest eradication, you're exposing the landscape and its sidewalks and its asphalt and roofs, right? So roofs that had been once overtopped by tree canopy. And that directly results in an almost 2 degrees Celsius increase in surface temperature. Surface temperature is our metric that we use because it is collected by satellite regularly, accurately, and it's a proxy for the real field, the ambient temperature as well. In addition to the temperature as a result of impervious surface increases, for areas that had lost tree canopy, like Burncoat, Greendale in particular, the summer warm period was extended by about 15 days. And what that means is people living in the same city, our city here, Worcester, were experiencing hotter, longer summer conditions than people living in areas that had intact tree canopy. As you might imagine, these are things we did not know or even hypothesize before we did the analysis. We've learned a lot from this. And if you just look at the pin oak in the middle here, there's a pin oak around 2011 on Dorothy Ave in Burncoat in 2011, and you can see it was small, a 2-inch diameter breast height and 12 feet tall. That's typically the size of trees as they're planted, at least in the post-ALB context. And then in 2023, when we did a survey in 2023, you can see it's now 43.4 feet high and 11.1 inches diameter. So pin oaks are always a great tree to show off because they do so well, but we found tremendous success in the tree planting program that has gone on in the city, both through the input of the Worcester Tree Initiative, the city itself, and the Department of Conservation and Recreation. What we talk about now, which is a retrospective, really applies to what we're doing today as well. Some of the policy contributions that have come from this work, it's about adaptive capacity, the adaptation to new challenges, being light on your feet, being active, being proactive is essential to this type of work. And the Miyawaki forest planting today is just a wonderful example of that. Some of the specimens are from Hadwin Arboretum. Delighted to tell you that. Once disused space is now helping propagate seedlings around the city. Could not be happier to see that. State funding is so important. So the funding for these operations and initiatives is really essential. So we studied that too. We've also looked into the more modeling side of things, both financial and ecological, the concept of economic benefits with tree planting. We've understood that a lot better in the last decade. And we've come up with some suggestions or metrics or heuristics for cities to think through. One is that tree planting density of 3 trees per acre, maybe 3 of these pin oaks per acre, can reach the largest amount of savings for a house cumulatively over time. And one of our past studies was actually done in Chicopee, Massachusetts, shows an annual savings of about $1,500 for residents that are living in an acre of 3 trees being planted. So that's at a minimum. If you were to go above 3, you will see those benefits increase a lot more. And looking at hedonic modeling, economic modeling, tree canopy of 30% near homes can increase their housing value by $1,800, all other things being equal. So we have snapshots of things that we can obviously talk about in more detail. And I want to give Nick an opportunity to talk about his latest results. But this is the geography of the longhorn beetle, Burncoat and Greendale neighborhoods. And the purple here is tree loss due to the USDA's aggressive work to eradicate the longhorn beetle through the removal of host trees. And so Norway maple being the major culprit there. Over 60% of the street trees in 2008 were Norway maple in that case. And over 34,000 trees were removed. This is larger than anything you'd see being lost in tornadoes that have happened in the last decade, or a large logging operation in Oregon. This far exceeds anything of that case. And of course, then the replanting happened, which is part of that adaptive capacity. And we would argue it's a model for a lot of cities and municipalities to think about how to kickstart replanting following a large disaster and hazard like the longhorn beetle. And so planting over 30,000 trees by 2014 was a goal that was set. And we're in the process of monitoring the temperature impacts of that tree planting and also the biodiversity and diversity of that tree planting. And this is just a great, simple but effective graphic, and Nick made this. Here's a red oak that's hanging out during the winter in Worcester. And you can see in 2005, that street, and you can see that the trees on that street, and they're all the same species, and they're all Norway maple. And you look at 2022, and it's the same street at the top, and you're seeing tulip trees, red oak, and things are a lot better. And so we've turned a corner in this city towards diversity and temperature regulation. So I'll turn it over to Nick now for the next part.
Yeah, so great to see everybody. Got outside and did some planting earlier, and just a fun, before I jump into this and the work that Joy's been doing and the work that the city of Worcester has been doing. My middle name is Akira, so it's so cool to see Akira Miracle, these forests being put in. So I haven't seen, you don't see that name too much in America, so really excited about that. So post longhorn beetle, Worcester definitely was more, as John was saying, much more aware of the benefits of trees, and what happens when you lose so many trees. So the founding of these new commissions, the Green Worcester Advisory Commission that's putting on this event today, the Urban Forestry Commission, hiring a company like Davey Tree to come back and do the second survey, and then putting out this master plan. It's all kind of momentum and continued progress towards Worcester being engaged around its urban forest. And there's also citizen action. There's a movement to save large trees and around Newton Square as well last year, or 2 years ago. So we're just seeing more and more awareness around these trees. And so recent research that we've been doing has been looking at the data that of these two different surveys from 2005 to 2022. Rob Antonelli has been really helpful with providing the data, and we've also been working with Molly Freilicher, who want to shout her out, who did 2010 kind of state of Worcester's trees a while back. And so as you can see, as already been said, I won't linger on this too much, big decrease in the Norway maple percentages. But what we wanted to do is compare these two data sets tree by tree. And so see, did this tree survive, or is this tree, one of the trees that is true mortality? And where are new trees going in? Are they in the same places as where there were old trees, or are there trees going in that completely different locations? And so some of this data might be interesting. Again, 44% of the trees in that 2005 survey have died since, and a lot of them are Norway maples. And that we expected that because of the longhorn beetle infestation. If we look at the new tree planting, we can see a lot of these trees just broadly are being replaced by prunus or cherry species. So a smaller tree, but one that is aesthetically pleasing. A few of you might be shocked to see that Norway maples are the second most common new street tree being, and these are all trees that are lower than 16 inches in diameter. So trees that would not have been around before. So we'll get into why that is and what that looks like. But for the rest of the new trees, you can see that there's a wide variety in species. We have oak, we have lindens, and then John's favorite, the honey locust, going at number 5. So lots of variety of our species. And then specifically the other category is now the largest category. So these are just the top 20 species being planted, but really importantly, the other category of many different types of tree species. So great to see. Just got to shout out our Norway maples for being resilient. You cut them down and 4 more grow in their place. So this is an example, West Pine Lane, where, clearly there was a Norway maple here. And then now we have 4 shoots coming up, being very well maintained by this local Worcester resident. But we're seeing 1,000 of these in various types throughout Worcester. Some of these trees are just growing naturally or reseeding. Other ones have been cut down and the rootstock is coming back up. And then in a few rare cases, residents have actually gone and planted their own Norway maple to bring it back. So we're looking into this more. It's quite curiosity. In terms of where mortality happens, I'd like you to just focus on 2 neighborhoods here. We have the Greendale neighborhood at the top, and right next to it is Burncoat, and that's really where the longhorn beetle impact was largest. And then also where we are right now, which is this Worcester Central District or downtown, and that is the middle neighborhood there. And what you'll see there is that in the mortality of trees around Worcester, we see that the largest mortality is where the longhorn beetle, infestation was the worst, and that is expected. But there's also a large patch of mortality, Grafton Hill, Union Hill, that was maybe perhaps unexpected, right? That's not where we saw the most longhorn beetle. Importantly, if you look at where the trees are being planted in Worcester, we see that there is, again, concentrated tree planting in the Greendale, Burncoat neighborhood, which is really great to see, and what we'd hope. But also there's concentrated tree planting in Grafton Hill, in parts of Grafton Hill and in Union Hill, specifically the Green Island neighborhood as well. So there seems to be planting where tree loss is generally happening, whether it was due to longhorn beetle or due to another thing, kind of tree turnover. And we removed this slide, but I will say that the DBH of the trees where the tree loss was happening in Union Hill, Grafton Hill, was very, very, very small. So we're seeing like high tree turnover, like trees being planted and the trees dying. We look at biodiversity. We looked at biodiversity in every single neighborhood in Worcester. I'm using the Simpsons Index, which combines species evenness and species richness. So it kind of takes into account the number of species and then the distribution of those species. We see that, in the beginning, especially in Greendale, but also in the downtown neighborhoods, there were already, due to existing tree planting, probably lots of or very high species richness. But now across Worcester, in almost every single neighborhood, we are seeing incredibly high values of species richness. And this is, most of these numbers are in like the high 0.9, like 0.97, 0.98. So incredible amounts of biodiversity by neighborhood across the city. And definitely fulfilling that goal of creating a resilient, at least street tree urban canopy. In terms of benefits and ecosystem services, these have not bounced back in the same way. So we're looking at in 2005, just from annual benefits. So this is benefits that occur every single year, around 1 million from the 1,500,000 from the trees. And then now around 600, 700,000. And that's probably mostly due to the fact that the young trees are just not providing the same amount of benefits that the mature trees that were lost provide. However, also important, the distribution of benefits has not changed. So the neighborhoods that got the most benefits, ecosystem services from the trees, cooling, stormwater runoff, etc., those benefits have not been spread to the rest of Worcester yet. In terms of what last summer, John and I with the Hero team went and talked to all these residents who were in the Burncoat and Greendale neighborhood about their trees. Why do they like their trees? What were the perceptions of the trees on their property? And you can see the both range of benefits and then some of the quotes explaining why or kind of giving more in depth about those trees. Some of them are like, they like the privacy. We saw a lot of arborvitae fences, but also shade was the most common benefit, like the thing that people kept coming back to. We did also see that tree benefits changed by scale. So residents liked having trees for certain benefits like shade or aesthetics, like on their property, but then there was also, or as a tree, just as they liked the tree. But then on their property, there was kind of different sort of benefits. And then at the neighborhood scale, these kind of like larger environmental benefits. And it was great to see that there was awareness of these different levels of benefits that trees provide. The residents also talked about challenges of having trees on their property, whether it was leaves, now shade was a negative thing, blocking the sun, issues around taking care of the trees and challenges around trees dropping leaves and whatnot. So there's definitely still challenges specifically around leaves and wildlife in order to convince or for residents to maintain their trees. We've also a little bit beginning to look into the environmental justice aspects of this, and this is just two layers that we're going to consider along with renter population and other kind of things, but this is just median household income and minority percentage non-white. And if just looking at these two neighborhoods here, the Greendale neighborhood and the Crown Hill or Piedmont neighborhood, these are both neighborhoods that are downtown Worcester, but they are experiencing radically different experience with their urban forest. So the Green Island neighborhood is one of the highest neighborhoods in terms of percentage of new trees, lots of new tree planting going on there. But we also know what else is happening in the Green Island neighborhood. We have a new stadium, there's lots of new development. These photos from 2017 to 2023 show incredible amounts of growth, but that comes with trees. We're seeing trees being planted on those streets. Whereas the Piedmont neighborhood is mostly residential and it's seen very little tree planting. So we'll make recommendations around that. But in terms of what the impacts of this tree planting is, I'm going to pass it back to John.
Just briefly, I'll say that there's a great, as you can see, a great success story from tree planting, but the growth of the city is resulting in the significant loss of cover. And so you can take, these are just some examples of where at Worcester State, the additional parking and then the temperature impact. So that's an increase of over 10 degrees Fahrenheit when we see those changes. So there's a lot of tree loss that is continuing, which echoes what Deb and I wrote in that op-ed a while back. And then this is as another example, Silver Linden Lane and Sourwood Circle in Worcester, housing developments, and then the temperature impacts there. Here's 10 to 8 degrees Fahrenheit. So those are ongoing issues. We found other things where trees can't be planted, and that is the case in many cases. White roofs can be a great solution to that. And so we found that for just under a half acre of roof, we're working in acres in this talk. That's going to give you, for white roof, that's going to give you a 1 degree Fahrenheit temperature decrease. And so looking at the Miyawaki forests of today, which we're delighted to see at about 0.15 and 0.23 acres, they're well on their way to doing their work of cooling. And you need fewer trees to do the same work of a white roof. So nothing can replace trees when they can be put in the ground, but white roofs are a good second choice. And what have the trees that were planted, what have they done? Here's an example from Burncoat and Greendale, and you're seeing across the top here, across the row, the differences between on the far left of the screen here, 2007 before longhorn beetle removal, 2010 after the removal, but during planting, and then 13 years, 2022, post longhorn beetle. The orange looking square area is the satellite reading of temperature, and you're looking at much, much warmer temperatures following the tree removal versus today. So the combination of these purple dots, which are City or Worcester Tree Initiative trees, and the green dots being DCR, Department of Conservation Recreation trees, this great combination of action to get trees in the ground is demonstrably cooling these areas that were very, very hot a very short time ago. So while we often speak to the need to wait for trees to grow to give their peak benefits, which is true, we are enjoying their benefits now. This is not a wait and see phenomenon at all. To conclude and to wrap up and summarize, Tree planting is highest in neighborhoods where the most tree loss had occurred. Most tree planting is needed in residential neighborhoods that have not been impacted by longhorn beetle, and those are the environmental justice neighborhoods of the city. Tree planting, as Nick mentioned well, has increased biodiversity tremendously, making this city much more resilient to future infestations. I've just been alerted to the sawfly, which has been introduced to the United States, that will attack elm trees like they need any more pressure. Third, Worcester residents value the benefits that trees provide, but more is needed in terms of outreach and education in that regard. And unfortunately, tree loss continues to dramatically impact land cover in the city as the city develops and surface temperatures are increasing, which will increase everybody's temperatures. And there's many people to thank, and they're all up here. And thanks for your attention. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you. So if you guys go to the table, we have about 10 or so minutes for questions. I have a bunch, but I know where you guys work, so I'll save mine for later. But if any of folks here in the audience have any questions, we can bring the microphone to you. So there we go. Paul.
Dr. Early, how do you quantify the benefits? How do you monetize the benefits of the tree? Do you use something like the Harvard A Foundation analysis, or what is, how do you do that?
Yeah, thanks for that question, Paul. So we use a program that the US Forest Service developed called i3, and i3 is very popular and it has improved over time as more people use it and break it and figure out what's better. It's gotten a lot better, like any software, like any program. And it takes the species and its crown width and diameter at breast height at the time of you want to analyze it. And then we'll calculate energy savings based on growth and distance to a home. The numbers going into how much energy is being used is based on the size of that home and various lookup tables. But we found it as a guide to help us understand, I think primarily, how many trees need to be planted at minimum to start decreasing numbers, even at early planting stage and not waiting 40 years. So to get, and if it's right, it's right everywhere. If it's wrong, it's wrong everywhere, and we can split the difference.
Yes, David and then Deb.
Good. So I know that because my wife and I live in a home that's on one of Worcester's wonderful bodies of water, and we can't put down a patio without getting permission from the city. But private homeowners can cut down every tree on their property without any obligation to inform anyone if that's what they're planning to do or what impact it might have on other people. Are there communities where there are legal restrictions on removal of private property trees? And is there anything like that under consideration either here in Worcester or Massachusetts broadly?
There we go. That's a great question. And actually there is some protection, like within a certain distance from like a sidewalk, even though it's your private property, there are like ordinances to protect those trees. But you're right, on private property away from the street, you can cut down the tree. And there are communities that are starting to try and turn the tide with that, with tree ordinances. We don't have one like that here in Worcester, but I know of other communities that are trying to create tree ordinances where the person who has private, if it's above a certain size, you have to go get a permission basically to cut it down or have a plan in place to replace it and the services provided. So things we've been learning at the commission, we've been digging into everybody's tree ordinances and seeing what people are doing and what makes the most sense for Worcester. Great question.
And Deb.
Well, following up on that, does that mean that that could be something that comes out of the urban forestry master plan and we can push the city to adopt that kind of an ordinance?
Yeah, so the current plan, which we're expecting a new one by our June 5th meeting, I'm not sure it'll be in that plan because we do want to be really thoughtful about what the ordinance recommendations are, but at our meetings, we've been talking about this past spring. That's been a big focus of what makes the most, like, what have people been doing? We've been compiling everybody's tree ordinances and thinking about what would make sense with our goal in the fall to really focus on moving that forward as a commission to propose things.
So where would the 3-to-1 requirement fall?
And that is a goal and I think some think it's a really ambitious goal, which I think we need ambitious goals to reach these canopy cover extent. But that's a goal in the plan to reach a 3-to-1. So every time we take a tree down in the city, but currently our only information about that is the public trees. We don't have information on private without repeat. Well, anyways, I won't get all there are ways, but we don't have that data right now.
And one last question about that. So the ordinance could also apply to private, meaning like new developments that are coming in, and you could require a 3-to-1 ratio.
That's a really great point that I feel like I missed, and you guys really emphasized with that awesome examples. And one thing we've talked a lot on the commission, and AJ Elton on the commission has really been spearheading those efforts too, and has a lot of expertise in it, having worked with other cities. He works with City of Providence on, working with developers and working with the city and create policies that will make it so that you have to plan a certain amount in developments.
Yes, Kim.
I've been thinking about Worcester's growth and development challenges over the years. And I just wondered, with this big population increase in the last decade, how much green space was lost in that decade compared to, I would imagine it's no higher and possibly less than earlier decades when the development controls and the public sentiment was different. Am I correct? Does anybody have that data?
We haven't, I wouldn't say that that A would be great to like really get concrete numbers on that. But both in Worcester and nationally, I would say tree loss is pretty consistent. Just regardless, like the beetle, it's amazing how small the signature is, and for the city as a whole. Just like it's I think about 25% of our total tree loss last decade. So it's not. We're seeing consistent tree loss decade to decade.
Yeah, we could get to the, sorry. We could get to those numbers. The tree loss due to development, I would say.
Green space loss to development, whether it's trees or not.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I think most of the green space is street canopy, I would say. So with that, there's been a lot, and that's what I'll say for now. I won't have an acreage for you, but it's, the city's lost a lot of trees in the last decade, no doubt about it.
We got time for one more question. Hassan, Ted is deferred.
Thank you, John. First of all, Professor Rogan, both of us are WPI graduate students. We're really thankful for your scholarship and research. We've been really using it in our work, so thank you so much for that. We have a question regarding the urban forest mastery plan that we've gone into. It talks a lot about the heat island effect. We wanted to ask, is there any consideration with regard to the winter for the selection of the trees? Because you plant the trees for shade in the summer, and in the winter, the pruning so that it doesn't interfere with the power line. What sort of consideration or disappointment was that?
Yeah, so it's great to highlight the winter. The benefits, the energy benefits are just summer. We should say that explicitly. I will say that, there's kind of two tacks with this. First, it is like trees cool in the summer, and they also are cooling in the winter, so we should be upfront about that. winters in New England are dramatically getting warmer. So and the hot, summers are getting much, much hotter. If we're thinking 30 years, 100 years, like, I think we need to be more, unfortunately, need to be concerned much more about the summers. And then also, we didn't touch on this as much, but there's extreme heat in addition to the urban heat island. So that's really where the, things like cooling areas, the Milwaukee forest, and then the urban canopy. So while winters, I would say, are concerned and residents do bring up the cooling in both, for things like urban heat, and it's just specifically the health hazards, and we're thinking summer.
All right, we're going to end it right there. So that's perfect. So again, thank you for our distinguished speakers. That was awesome.